Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm trying to talk about modeling using like a volumetric approach, which instead of assembling lots of different parts, this is to create a single volume for the form. Um, what I'm going to try to do is do it without using any kind of transformational commands. We're only going to use the gumball, and the only other commands are probably going to be the split tool, the split face tool rather, and the merge face tool for the actual faces on the volume. The example that we're going to use is going to be the Seattle Public Library, and what we're going to have as a starting point are some references images. So if you're following along with the tutorial model, we've got picture frames here. I'm going to turn those on. You can see we've got section in place already. And I've also trimmed them out just to kind of visually cut down on the clutter. And that's just kind of simply by tracing out some of the features of the sections and then trimming them with a regular kind of trim command. I've also got some elevations in place, and we've also got some plans in place as well. So how we're going to do is we're basically going to start with a kind of box-like form. We're going to create the faces that we need, and after that we're going to end up moving those around and producing the final kind of single volume. We've got an example of it here. It's going to look like this. So you can see that that gets the kind of general form of the library down. Okay, so I'll hide that example for a second, and we'll start this from scratch. I've got a layer here for massing volume, and that's what I'm going to use to put this volume on. And the first thing we need to do is just have some kind of volume to start with. So that's one of the reasons why I put the picture frames in there and trim them. And I'm going to turn off my elevations for a second. And we've got our plans and our sections here. Underneath my plans, I've got this site plan. I don't really need to use that for the volume. So I'm going to turn that off for a moment. And now I'm going to create a bounding box by creating a box that's going to include just the extreme dimensions of all of these picture planes that have been trimmed. So I'm going to go into my analyze and do a bounding box. And the objects are going to frame with a box. Pick those and hit enter. I want to use the world coordinates, that's fine, and I want my outputs to be solids. If it's not solids, you want to change that to be solids. And make massing on my active layer, and then I'll hit enter on that. I'll turn on wireframe so you can see it. So you can see we've got just a kind of like a basic box shape going on here. It's a little bigger than we might want, and that's because the sections actually include the adjacent streets right here. That's fine. We're going to actually need a little breathing room. And so if we take a look at the library, it's basically got four zones. It's got what I call two stationary zones, which is the book spiral right here, and the entry that happens on 4th Avenue down here, and it goes into the topography as it goes up to 5th Avenue. And then we've got this shifting volume for the living room space and meeting rooms, and you've got the shifting volume up here which has the reading room and the headquarters already at the top. So we're going to have like four zones, and that's where we're going to start. We're going to take the volume. I'm going to turn off, actually I can leave these picture frames on for now, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just use the sections and not the elevations. And I'm going to split this volume up. I'm going to change my layer to the splitting curves layer, and I'm going to duplicate the border of the top of the volume. So I'm going to go into my curve menu and do curve from objects, duplicate border, and I'm going to duplicate the border just of this top face. So in order to do that, since this is an entire solid volume, I'm going to hold down Control Shift just to pick the top surface. I don't need all the borders that are happening on this one. So I've isolated that, and I'm going to hit Enter. So that's giving me this new curve. And I'm going to split this into like 4 stacks. So I'm going to move to one of my elevations here. I'll pick the west elevation. And I'm going to move this new curve down to what is the kind of first part. Doesn't have to be directly on it. You just kind of going to get it in the neighborhood. This is where the 4 kind of levels happen here of the book spiral. And then I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to start dragging this on the gumball. I'm going to tap Alt until the plus sign comes up. Go down to the bottom of the book spiral area. Make a copy there. And then I'm going to make another copy. So drag again. Tap Alt pretty quick. And then I'm going to go down to where it starts to straighten out the volume. So this is the living room entry on 5th Avenue, and this is kind of where it straightens out. So if you look at it in perspective, these are kind of the zones that we're going to use. I'm going to split this faces, the side faces, not a Boolean operation, just to split the faces using these curves. Let me take off the picture frames for a second. And I'm going to do the split face command. The solid edit tools under faces. I can split faces. I can, even though it's asking for 1, I can split multiple ones. So I'm going to select those 4 and hit Enter. And instead of drawing the split axis, I'm just going to pick the curves for the split axis. So I'm going to use this curve option here. Click that and pick the 4 curves that I've got and hit Enter. So now, take off the split curve layer. You should be able to see, it might be a little bit easier in the shaded mode, that, and I'm going to hold down Control Shift so I can select individual objects. I've got individual faces, 3 faces per side, or actually 4 faces per side that we've got here using 3 curves. So that's good. That's what I want. I'm going to go in the way that my elevations that I put in here are set up. They're a little bit in front, so I can kind of use it as a reference. So a lot of the kind of volumetric operations we do are just going to be by looking at the outside volume. I'm going to go into my elevation. So I've got a viewport for each elevation. I've also got viewports for each section as well happening here. I'm going to go to my west elevation, and it's in a wireframe view. I can kind of see what's going on here. For now, I'm actually going to bring down the roof to the actual roof level. We'll worry about this little volume later. Right now, it's a little bit big for what we need. So I'm going to hold down Control Shift, and that's going to do a sub-object selection. I'm going to draw a bounding box around the top surface, and I'm going to drag it down. I can snap to the kind of top of these picture frame surfaces. I'm not worried about any kind of like deformation on that. That one's not any good because I forgot to lock the picture frames. So let me grab it again and bring it down. Since it's still using the gumball, I'm not worried about it not being totally a planar move. I'm also going to bring up the basement kind of surface floor a little bit. So I'm going to do the Control Shift again and bring it up to about there. And I'm going to tighten up the sides a little bit. So I'm going to do a Control Shift selection of the sides, bring those in. And I'll bring it in to about right there. Looks good. So in my west elevation, it looks good. I'm going to check out another adjacent elevation and maybe bring it in a little bit more on this side to about where the basement is ending right there. And on this side, you have to deselect somewhere every time after you do these kind of sub-object selections because it'll just keep adding to the selection. So I'm going to go into about there, a little bit closer in there. Moving into there. On my gumball options here, if you click the white bunny tail there, we've got snappy dragging on, so I can use my snaps when I drag to the objects. So it's a little bit tighter, it's a little bit kind of closer to what we want for the volume. Not there yet, obviously. I'm going to do an incremental save now. I've got a keyboard shortcut for it. I'm just going to hit Control D, and I'm going to kind of keep incrementally saving this process along the way so I can document it later. And now I can first, I'm going to take off my sections and take a look at this volume. I'm going to go back to my west elevation, and the kind of process is you've got to move some of this geometry a little bit. You've got to kind of tilt it to create the proper geometry to set up new faces. So it's going to be a little bit of moving an edge and then making new faces and then moving those faces. So at the very top of the actual object here, you can see that in some of the elevations we don't have this new series of faces that come out. So we have a new face here and a new face here and one here and here. This is in the west and north elevations. In the south and the east elevations over here, that doesn't happen. So I'm going to go into my west elevation, and I'm going to actually move the side over for it. So I'm going to hold down Control Shift and draw just a box around the corner. If you look in perspective, what's that doing? It's just grabbing the edge for a sub-object selection. So I go back in the west. I'm going to move this over to here. And I'm going to go to the north elevation. And I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to go the other way with it. So I'm going to hold down Control Shift and drag it over like that. So now we've got some edges. We don't want to do it anywhere else. We want to keep these other intact. But what it's done, I'm going to turn it on shaded, is it's given now edges where we didn't have them before that are slanted. And that's going to allow us to fit this triangle in here. Because we can make a triangle now. Before we didn't have the proper angle for it. And we could only just do another rectangle here. So I'm going to go into the south elevation. And I'm going to split the face up. So I'm going to use the split face command. It's under, I showed it to you, it was under solids, under solid edit tools, under faces, split face. It's also under solid tools bar right there. And you can see the split planar face right there. I'm going to run that command. It's asking me the face to split. I'm going to pick this one, hit enter. Start of this split axis, so I'm literally just going to draw it this time instead of using the curve options across the face. I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to snap to the end point of the surface. That is the picture frame. I'm going to go all the way out into and get the intersect. So over here I've got my intersect snap on and my end snap. I'm going to go out to draw that first one there. I've got one going across, and I can keep drawing as many as I want. And once I've got one coming across like this, I'm going to draw one down. And if I have that intersect snap on, I can intersect the new split that I did. So I'm going to draw that one. And then I'm going to start with that intersection and go from here to the corner. So I've got three that I split, and then I'm going to right click. You want to be careful when you're doing these. You want to make sure you definitely have the intersection snap, because if it's a little off, it'll create another edge, and instead of having a triangle, we're going to have four sides. So now we've got it. I'm going to merge my faces together. So I'm going to go into my solid and go back to my solid edit tools with faces. I'm going to merge face. I don't want to do merge all faces. I just want to merge the regular face. I'm going to select the face to merge. So I'm going to merge this one and this one. And I can take off my picture frame for a second and see what we've got. So right now we've got this one and this one going here. And this one is split. Now I can check, I can just do the object selection and check on that. That looks good. That looks good. And that looks good. So I've got 3 faces up here on this face. So I'm going to go to my perspective now. And just like we needed this kind of edge here, it's going to make it easier in my other elevation over on the east here. If I have this protruding out, it'll help me kind of link this side to this side. If we take a look at, you know, the way that this building works, it protrudes this out in these 2 directions, and we look at the back of that protrusion out here. So I'm going to do sub-object. I'm going to grab that new face. I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. I'm not too concerned how far out. It's just a matter of creating a new edge here. And you want to kind of make sure it's nice and clean. I've got my ISO curves set on. If I look at my display option there, it's easier with them off to see what's going on. But I kind of have them on as a check to make sure that I don't produce a lot of ISO curves. If you get a lot of ISO curves happening, that means that you've got like an extra surface and one of your corners is not quite right and you want to redo it. So now I've got that new edge that I'm talking about. Now I've got a corner right here that I can use to line up on the other elevation. So I'm going to go to my east elevation and I'm going to make it shaded. And you can see now that I've got that corner that I can snap to split the face again. So we're going to do something similar with the picture frame back on. You can see I've got a similar situation. I've got this triangular action that's happening here. So I'm going to run this split face again. Get on that corner and just go straight across. Get on this corner and go down and intersect it. Go to this intersection and go down to this corner here. Same exact kind of geometry. I'm going to right click to accept it. My picture frame goes off for a second. I'm going to merge these 2 faces. Button for merge faces there. Just going to merge these 2. So I should have 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to go in my perspective and kind of test it out. I'm going to do a sub-object and move it out. And that looks okay. And that's the basic process that we use for this. You kind of move what you need to move to create the proper edges, and then you just make new faces and move the new faces. So we're going to repeat that down below for the other geometry that we've got down here. So we've created this up here, and we're going to do the kind of same thing. It's a little bit more complicated, a couple extra faces, but it's exactly the same kind of logic to it. We just need a couple extra faces to pull it off. It's just a little bit more steps, but it's exactly the kind of same workflow. So if you've done it before, you can do it. These kind of tilt in the other direction, kind of opposite of this tilt. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go to my north elevation and turn on my picture frames. And in order to kind of get some of this geometry, I need to have the proper angles again, right? So the next area I'm going to try to produce is this one right here. And in order to do that, I need this angle. Right now, a straight line is not going to do me any good. I need to compress it to create an angle there. I'm going to grab the side of what this edge is, the book spiral section. If you take a look, we split that face like this, so there's an edge right here I can use. So I'm going to grab that edge. I'm going to hit Control-Shift, grab that edge, and move that edge in. And you can see that the book spiral tilts. Now's a good time to talk about that. You could definitely split the faces accurately with this tilt. But if you do that, it's going to create more complicated faces with more ISO curves. And after we do a lot of these kind of moves, it tends to produce a lot of extra curvature actually in the surface, and we don't want that. It's a little easier to just make all the faces you need and then move the faces and edges accordingly, and it'll keep everything flatter and cleaner. That part is actually pretty simple to do once you've got the correct faces. It's more important just to have the correct faces and connections, because after that you can move it and snap it to whatever you need to, and you're kind of guaranteed that everything will stay planar if you use the gumball. So I've moved this in. Now I've got this angle here that I can use. I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm going to split now this face. I'm going to treat the way that this library is, I'm going to treat this facade the way it opens up to create this kind of arcade that you can walk through. I'm going to treat this as one triangle of the facade. And so I've got a triangle here, one here, one here. I'm going to do the split face command. That's the merge. I'm going to do the split. There we go. Split this face. Start of the split axis. First I'm going to do this rectangle that I've got. I'm going to snap to the corner here and then smart track over to the edge. When you're drawing these split axes, you've always got to go to the edge of the face or it won't work. You can go beyond, that's fine, but you can't stop short of it. It's like doing any kind of split. And I'm going to take it all the way over to the other side. And I'm going to do it again from the bottom. So I'm getting the edge, and then I'm using that to smart track. My smart track's on down here. And go over to the edge. Get that intersect snap. I'm going to again do the one that goes from here to here. So if you don't see anything popping up, you can use the near snap. And that, for some reason, works pretty well to get your intersections there. So we've got a split there. I'm going to create this triangle. It's going to go to here, kind of create it somewhere near it, right? I'm more concerned about the geometry right now. The accuracy can come with moving things around. I'm going to create this triangle, making sure you get that intersect. You can even be careful and turn the near snap off again. And do another intersection to the intersection down here. So that should be enough. We're going to have some extra pieces because these are going to be split up, but we can just merge those. I hit enter. Turn off my picture frame for a second. And, oh, looks like I missed one here. So I'm going to split the face again. And I can just split this one from here to here. And see how that looks with the picture frames. Okay. And I can merge the face. So I'm going to do a merge face. And just keep running it again. So repeat that command one more time for this part and this part. And finally here and here. So I just keep repeating that command until I've got 3 faces here, 3 faces there. So when you have the faces you need, it's just like before. I'm going to go into my perspective view, find that facade. It's over here. And I've got to do something over to this side. I've got to do a similar operation. So I want that edge out there. So I'll do a sub-object selection of that rectangle. And I'm just going to move it out a bit. And double check here. Everything looks pretty clean. So I'm going to go and do a kind of similar final kind of operation like this. So we've only got to do 4 of these kind of operations. And the next one is going to be in the west elevation. So go to my west elevation and take a look at the picture frame. And we've got one more here. So we've already got this corner. That's going to give us what we need here. What we need right here is, again, this kind of angle that's actually for the living room entry. So I'm going to grab this edge. Since it's shaded, it's a little tougher to grab. So for a second, I'm going to turn on wireframe, and that'll kind of expose this edge. I'll do a sub-object selection of that object. I'm going to remember to click to deselect over that. And this guy's going to go over here. I can snap to that. Make it shaded again so you can see it a little better. and we can split this face up, this one. So I'm going to go to my split face, start of the split axis, and actually I want to undo that because I still had this sub-object selected. So I'm going to zoom out and run the command again, split face, face to split, hit enter, and now I can draw them. So I can ignore this right here and just go with this and resize as necessary. I'm going to go with the corner and run it all the way to the intersection, and do the same for the bottom. Run it over there. Create this one. So again, I can use the near snap for that, and then turn it back off, and then just connect intersections. So I want to connect this one here, and intersection to this corner here, and finally this intersection to this corner here. So I should have 1, 2, 3 triangles, and 1, 2, 3 faces over here as well. Hit enter. I'm going to hide my picture frame for a sec. Take a look at what we've got. So we've basically just got to make this kind of a little cleaner into 3 triangles over here. This is already set, so I'll use my merge face. And this one, and actually it's only 2 triangles, right? Yep. So this one, do my merge face. Looks good. Go back in perspective and check and see how we did it. The reason why I like to do it this way and move it out and then split it is for the reason of matching the corner, definitely. But also, if you split everything first and then decide to move everything, you have to move these 2 out immediately, which would be these 2, which is fine, but it's just a little bit more tricky. If you try to move out one that way, it gets really warped. So I'm just going to move this out a little bit and test it. Make sure I didn't make any extra faces by mistake. And yeah, that looks pretty good. So we're pretty close. We've got almost all the new geometry that we need. And whenever I do any kind of move like this, I always want to just do another incremental save. Should be probably doing it more often than that. But now I'm actually ready to kind of just tighten up all the geometry. I've got all the faces I need to make the geometry of the facade, so I just have to kind of tighten it up. And I can just go to each elevation and do that. Turn back my picture frames and just start moving things around. So I can just sub-object select my faces and start matching them up to where they're supposed to be with the snappy dragging going on there. It's not going to be a problem. If things need to, start tilting for the book spiral, then now's the time we can start doing things like that. So you can see that this face down here is underground. So in order to kind of facilitate that, I'm going to actually bring it and make a new one later. I'm going to bring this face over because that tuck-in's fine. What I do want is have this geometry, and I can make that parking structure and other volume. Well, I can actually even just do it right now. I'm going to take it and then now drag it back out. But instead of just dragging it, I'm going to hit the control, hold down the control button and make it an extrusion instead. And it'll just extrude that volume out and leave everything else intact. And you can see, if you look in Wireframe, that it's still a single solid. It's not adding another solid to it. So it's pretty clean. And turn my picture frames back on. This elevation looks okay for now. I can start also adjusting for the book spiral. bringing it down. And that's what's actually going to start to create the ramping that happens. And I can compare it to my section too. I look at my sections and turn off my elevations. South elevation. Get my elevation back on, I can just start moving the faces I need to move. Lock my picture frame so I can grab faces, start moving them, right? Remember, I can use this mini C-plane, start getting the ramping, and this can come in. In my east, by the process, you know, I've kind of gotten into the east is already starting to come together, and the same thing with the north. So I've got the basic kind of volume worked out. Looks like that this one actually got moved in incorrectly. It looks like I had the control down on it when I moved it in, and it created some extra geometry. So it did an extrusion. If that happened to you as well, that's fine. You know, it's not always perfect. It just created some new kind of geometry. You just don't want to be bringing things in when you're holding down control, because it's like the inverse of an extrusion. So go back to, I believe it's the west elevation, and hold down control. Start dragging it out first. And I think what actually happened is when I moved it, I grabbed this little extra edge here as well. So I'm glad that came up, because once you get a little bit of extra geometry like we've got, it's a little tougher to grab things in elevation. You want to start grabbing things only in kind of perspective, so you know what you're grabbing. So I hold down, I'll do my control shift and make sure I'm only doing that face now, and going back into the west elevation and starting to drag it out, and then hitting control to make it an actual extrusion, so that I'm not bringing out too many objects. So that looks way better. And in my top plan, I've actually, you can see the kind of stair and elevator access for the roof, and this is where we're going to create that volume on the top. Since I want to split the face right in the middle, and it's just going to be this rectangle, I'm just going to draw it. And just like any other split command, and if I'm in a parallel view, I don't even have to worry about where my world C plane is, because I can just draw it and split the face with a curve, and if it looks like it's on that surface, then it's good enough to split that face. So I'll turn on my splitting curves layer and just do a rectangle. And this is snapping to the edge of the picture frame surface, and I'm just bringing it out. Let's see. Like that. I'll use that to split the face. So I'm going to put my layer back on the masking volume, active layer. I'll sub-object select the smaller face, and I can go into an elevation here. I'll go into my south elevation, start dragging that up, but then I'll hit the control to make it an extrusion. And in my perspective view, I've got that mass added to it. Save it again. And there we have it. There's the volume. Thanks for watching.